Hi, this is Ilka Cassidy with Passive House Accelerator, and thanks for tuning in to the special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast recorded at the Sustainability Symposium 24 in Philadelphia. In 2 interviews, we discussed the value of a variety of certification systems. Should we use them all or none? Where are the synergies between them? And how do we assure the best outcome for the project and hold ourselves accountable even if we don't go through certification?
Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Rob Fleming. I'm the Director of Sustainability at FCA, which used to be Francis Kaufman. And I've been there for about 2 years. I was brought on as the Sustainability Director because the principals felt like they had a great firm, but they weren't doing everything that they wanted to do for sustainability. And they realized one day that they were super swamped. Everybody else was super swamped, but they had a responsibility to do this. So they reached out to me, asked me if I would come and help out. And as soon as I got there, I met a lot of amazing people. I'm looking at this great projects happening, but I saw that everybody was very busy. Bandwidth is very limited. Everything has to be one page because people got a lot going on. So it's like, how do we achieve sustainability in this environment? And also I had noticed that we had some lead projects that had been completed, but we were still wrestling with the paperwork. I'm like, that's weird. Like, why? And Adam's over there. Don't worry, Adam. And I'm like, so we need to really rethink the model. We need to come up with a different approach that's going to be doable. And it's really a staggered approach, like a ladder. So this year we're on the first rung of the ladder. And in fact, this presentation today was a lot about, not about Rob Fleming, but about all these great leaders in the firm and also about these partnerships that we have with Turner. So this idea today was to really make this a collaborative effort. So how do we collaborate? How do we work together to build this system? And it was a lot of talking. The first year was just a lot of chatting, and I would come over to people's desks. I come over and say, hey, Sarah, tell me about what you're doing. And she's like, why is Rob talking to me? But what I was trying to figure out was like, what is the makeup of the firm and what's possible? And that's how we led into the system that we developed, which was this idea of a tiered system that was going to be able to be doable at steps. And so we have very, very modest goals for year 1, very light lifts. We want to get people used to getting little tiny wins, and then we'll just make the wins better and better each year till we get to where Brian wants us to be at 30% better energy efficiency. Right? That is the goal in 6 years is to get there. Will we get there? I don't know. But if we don't ask, we don't have. And so from there, we signed the 2030 initiative, and we literally signed it on a big piece of paper, and people felt like, oh, this might happen. I think that's been the kind of fun thing this year is people are saying, oh, this is really happening. This wasn't just Rob coming in with a bunch of energy. This is like a real thing. And the other thing is we invested in education. So we sent a lot of folks to Penn for short courses, and then we're doing a lot of education within the office at lunchtime. So people are giving up their lunches so that they can learn how to do this. And there's a lot more to say, but I think that covers sort of the baseline.
So what was really interesting about is that you highlighted all these different certifications that are out there, and that you made a decision to actually not really pick one certification that the office can reach. You basically said, okay, there are really good things about all of them, and how do we go through a project and being held accountable for sustainability goals without actually having a third-party review process. So why did you do that, and what are your goals?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty simple. I did a lot of reflection around being a registered architect, and what does that mean? And this idea of health, safety, welfare just kept coming up. It's like, what is our primary role in society? Is it not only to make beautiful objects and experiences, but it also have to do with this responsibility. So I started to think about it from that point of view, and that drove a lot of the work going up and moving forward. And I was watching everybody getting accreditations and certifications, and really proud of Passive House and LEED, and I was like, these are great, but our clients weren't clamoring for it. And I started to think, it's like, oh my God, what happens when a client doesn't ask for LEED or Passive House? And that's really what started this whole thing. It's like, we got to hit that 90%. And that's where the big changes come from lots of little things and not necessarily the one-off projects. So that was where we were heading with that.
Yeah, and one thing you said that really struck me is that only, I don't know, what did you say, like 90% of projects actually don't choose a certification. So how do you, or more, probably.
Probably more.
Right? So how do you still, rather than saying, okay, we're not going with any kind of third-party certification, instead of not doing anything, how do we lift the entire project up to meet goals and, for us being held accountable for that. So
and that's how Carolina said it in our presentation, that, we're moving a big ship, we're turning a big boat. And it does turn really slowly with the rudder. And right now we're the rudder in the firm. And the whole firm is, just starting to tip a little. People are calling me and it's like, Rob, we're doing a proposal for Jefferson. What are we going to say about sustainability? And that wouldn't even have happened last year when I was here. So we're getting to have that beginning of, it's like a virus in people's heads, right? So, and then, the idea was we want to talk to people. I started talking to Kayla at Turner. I was like, what's Turner doing? And then it turns out Turner's doing a lot, like way more than I thought, no offense. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. And then we were talking to our MEP and our structural, like, oh, everybody's talking about this. So it started to build some momentum, but it could be just bigger than the firm. I think that's a big part of it, too, is to be outside of just your firm.
Great. And what is Turner doing?
So Kayla Reddington, Turner Construction Company. I've been with the company for 12 years in many, many different roles. Currently Sustainability Manager of New Jersey and Pennsylvania for the last 2.5 years. And Turner has actually been doing a lot for a while. I've always been in a sustainability group, just more as an extracurricular, if you will. And it's always part of our core priorities, but I'll say we focused in the past on what we could do and what we could change. So a lot of measuring our waste and waste reduction strategies and items like that, which were great. But we've transitioned, I'd say, in the last maybe 3 years, 4 years, to really be an integral partner to teams like FCA, as well as our clients, to be integral in the design phase as well, and make sure that we're helping to influence the design and sustainability, focusing on a lot more subjects than just waste and just what we can control within our site fence, but looking at resiliency, circularity, embodied carbon, so that we can optimize, right? So if we're working in this collaborative capacity, we can really make those optimal solutions for every single one of our projects.
Turner is a very large company.
We are national and international largest general contractor. We've also been the largest green builder for the last 16 years in a row. A lot of that has to do with revenue, and it does have a lot to do with lead projects, and 50% of our revenue is actually usually certified projects. So we do see a large majority of that. It's revenue based, right? So it's a lot of those larger sectors, higher education, healthcare we'll see pursue, but it's definitely not every client. I know Rob made a comment during our presentation that we're seeing a lot of clients who have these ESG goals or these commitments, but they're not bringing them down to the project level, right? And we're trying to help them, along with our team members on the project and all stakeholders on the project, make that connection. Company culture we were talking in the presentation about challenges and that being one of the biggest challenges. And Carolina mentioned the big ship. You can look at the big ship in many facets. And so, we're trying to get to the point where sustainability is part of the culture. The example that I gave during the presentation is when a decision is made, not only thinking about schedule and budget and quality and safety, but is sustainability part of the factor? And it doesn't need to be this extensive, elaborate solution. It could be as simple as when we're temporary heating a space, closing a door to make sure that that heat isn't escaping and we're being wasteful. That's when you really have culture shift, when people are thinking about things from that capacity. And we've made movement. We're making progress. We've grown our sustainability group. We've integrated more folks onto our teams, but there's still a lot of people that you have to shift in order to get that culture. And I know Rob spoke in the presentation in terms of principal engagement. Our leaders are all bought in. They're all on the team, right? Then there's folks like myself within the sustainability group pushing this along. We need to get that middle group really to transition and culture shift, and that's our largest group, and that's the biggest challenge.
So on a project base, what does that mean for Turner? How do you implement all these sustainability goals? Maybe you can talk about that.
My name is Sarah Murphy. I've been with Turner for about 20 years. Right now I'm a senior estimator in the pre-construction department. My goal right now is I'm working on the target value design approach. So we are an IP D-Light project on the case study we presented. The goal is that we're able, the owner, the client, the design team, the consultants are all able to make decisions, informed decisions based on understanding where the budget is on a weekly basis. They have that real-time feedback from the construction team as to how the design is progressing and how it's impacting the budget, so that their sustainability goals can be maintained throughout the duration of the project and they can see them realized instead of them being value engineered out at the end because the project is over budget. So really that's my goal, is to kind of keep the team updated as to where the budget is and, like I said, help inform decisions.
Awesome, thank you. So going back to FCA, so you picked certain points of focus within your sustainability framework. So what are those focus points?
I'm Carolina Downey. I'm an architect at FCA. I'm also a LEED accredited professional. We based our system off of the AIA's framework for design excellence. I covered designing for resources, and we split that into decarbonization and sustainable materials. With decarbonization, we really focused on this particular project on minimizing construction waste and reducing embodied carbon. And we really tried new things that suited the project in order to do that. Like, for example, we had a lot of prefab elements, unitized elements, and modular construction. And that was something new that we tried for this project because it suited our objectives on this particular project, and our client was open to it. And Turner, of course, had the experience to back us up on it. When it comes to sustainable materials, we set goals for ourselves, and then we set targets against our baseline goals. And we made incremental changes. I don't think the numbers that I showed on the screen today, as far as what we were doing, really blew anyone away necessarily. But the important thing is that we're doing something rather than nothing. And when it comes to sustainable design and third-party certifications, so many projects fall between the cracks of those third-party certification systems. There's this mindset that it's kind of black and white. Like, if it's not LEED, then what did you do? You did nothing. And that's simply not true. And we wanted to celebrate the successes that we did have.
Right. Thank you so much. So the project that you were talking about was a healthcare project, correct? And Brian, you are the company's passive house consultant. So you look at a project from the energy saving perspective. So what is your experience working on this project and in general working on the framework with FCA?
Sure. So my name is Brian Fullen. I'm a project architect at FCA, and I am a certified passive house consultant. I think the lone one at the firm so far, but hoping to grow that number very soon here in the near future. And I guess just touching a little bit on what Rob mentioned, or your question of why we would do this approach, right? And I think one of the things it lets us do is it lets us target very specific parts of each system to meet the client's goals, right? So a lot of what we talked about was aligning with client sustainability goals, but also their plan for the future. When we talk about aligning with the client's goals in the healthcare sector, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services pledge allows these health systems, major health systems, to commit to being net zero by 2050. There's also some 2030 checkpoints and some other requirements they have to do. And so a lot of people wonder, how passive house can connect and relate to healthcare systems and hospitals being so large. Obviously not being a house like passive house, has in its name. And so, if we look at that net zero goal, one of the ways of getting there is really addressing and implementing those passive house strategies, so that when you do target that net zero, end goal, it's not a huge pull. You're not just filling your roofs with solar panels. It's a more limited, approachable approach. And
then, so what is sustainability without health? correct? And that's something that Sarah is really focusing on, looking at what does the environment actually look like that people spend a lot of time in.
So my name is Sarah Harvey, and I'm the senior interior designer for this project and at FCA. And I focused on well-being for this portion of the presentation. Well-being is something that's arguably the least quantifiable of all of the items that we talked about today and all the items in our list. So the question is truly, why is it important? And why do we need to do that? We have lots and lots of research to understand that our connection with nature is intuitive to us, is inherent in us, and we cannot escape it. We have to remember that we are animals first and get out of our higher brain. Remember that we're part of a group. And that comes back to that culture change that Kayla talked about. We have to think about why we're not going for it, why we're not being bold, and it's part of our pain response. We're trying to avoid a pain response. We need to get past that and work as a community to heal those wounds and change that mindset and get back to nature a little bit better. We know that nature lowers our blood pressure and plants give us chemical stimulants that protect us. We need to remember that we can improve people's emotions through our spaces, and we want them to feel a more positive mindset and act more positively towards each other and have that group mindset. It's all linked together and we can't escape it, so we need to remember that. It's just more meaning for why the construction process, the design process, and sustainability should not be separated from each other. We are part of our environment and we cannot separate that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway of about this framework that you're trying to set up, that you might not achieve the best goal for the inhabitants and for the building if you only look at one certification. So stepping out, looking at everything a little bit more holistically, being careful to use the right components, because you can't just do a little piecemeal of everything, because that doesn't really work either. So you do have to have the knowledge behind all these different certification goals or these different approaches, but then you can really put something together that is truly sustainable and good for the occupants.
Sustainable design really just meets the bare minimum of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. We do have these stretch goals that we look for, but sustainable design really should be the basis of everything that we do.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing about your framework, that it's just integrated into the company's thinking, and that it's not really perceived as something additional, even cost-wise. So as a client, it's just something that you get working with FCA or with Turner. It's just integrated, and it's not really an add-on. So, yeah, great work. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us here today. My name is Drew Lavine. I'm a partner at Revision Architecture in Philadelphia. And here at Revision, I'm director of architecture. So I work with the architects here at Revision on all different kinds of high-performing and green projects, ranging from single-family homes to commercial projects, new construction, adaptive reuse. And we have a good time. We have fun here working on these kind of weird green and sustainable projects.
We certainly do. Thanks for making a little time with us, Ilka. Happy to jump out of session and chat a little bit. I'm Scott Kelly. I'm the founding partner here at Revision Architecture. I split my time between the high performance building design consulting studio and the architecture studio. And Drew is right. We have a lot of fun here.
Great. You presented about a really, really impressive project. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the project that we were presenting on is one that we recently completed at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's a new building on their campus that's called the Fahey Commons, and it's a 21,000 square foot multi-purpose building. It's got staff offices, classrooms, common spaces, and we're really excited about this project because it was designed and constructed at a very high level, and it's achieved some pretty big things at this point, which we're very excited about. It's the first certified core Living Building Challenge project. We're really happy about that. It's also certified LEED Platinum, and it's right now in the middle of its Passive House certification too. And it's had a very interesting journey in terms of how it got there.
And you said it's the first in the world, correct?
Yeah, the first one. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the core pathway Living Building Challenge was introduced in 2019, right before the pandemic. And we were one of the first projects that kind of jumped in and said, we're going to do this. And we pushed through the pandemic, and we're just so excited to have gone through the design, got our core ready designation. And then over a year, we had to prove it through verified performance data.
Awesome.
I think how it went through its certification process is really kind of a really unique and good story. When the RFP came out to do the work, we received it, and it said roughly designed to LEED Silver standards. And we said, okay, no problem. We can handle that. And through its journey, I think it was clear to us, clear to Drew and I, from the visioning sessions, what the students and the faculty wanted was really aligned with Living Building Challenge and the philosophy behind that. And then it just took a little bit of time to reveal itself. From the beginning, the inception of design, I think Drew and I made sure that we designed and baked in all the appropriate cost-effective strategies to get to Living Building Challenge. And it wasn't until really the end of design developments that the college turned around and said, hey, maybe we ought to do that. How much more is it going to cost? And working with the construction team, which was Whiting Turner, we figured it was maybe a little less than $100,000 on a $10.5 million project. So not bad. And then as we proceeded, they realized, well, you probably need to follow the name brand of LEED. So let's get a LEED project, and let's just not design to the standard. Let's actually go through the certification. So we went down that path and went into construction documents and began construction. And once again, we kind of baked everything in from the beginning. And when I say that, we were looking across 3-4 different rating systems, taking the best and the highest bar in each of them and really designing to that and following that. In construction, our construction manager realized, hey, we're probably getting a LEED Platinum. And so we let the school know that, and they were excited about that. And then one other critical step happened in design development. We asked them if they wanted to pursue LEED, Living Building Challenge, and Passive House. They eventually said yes to Living Building Challenge and LEED, but they said no to Passive House. We were told just to drop it. It wasn't the relevant thing to them. But it is relevant, and it's what our firm believes in, and so we do it anyway. Basically baked in all the things that needed to be put in there for a good process. And when construction ended and we did our blower door tests, the college realized we passed the blower door test for Passive House. And so they came back to and asked us, hey, can you still get certification for that? And we said, yeah, sure. We did everything. We just didn't tell you. So off we went, and now we're finishing up our Passive House certification.
That's awesome. So what's really interesting here, and that's actually the reason I wanted to talk to you too as well after your presentation. So this morning I attended a session with Rob Fleming and his team, and they basically looked at their projects from a very holistic point of view, where they didn't want to go down one rating system or one path of a rating system. But what they did is to set up a framework for their firm so that they can still be held accountable even if they don't do any certification. So for you, with this particular project, it's kind of similar in a way where you wanted to look at it more holistically. So you didn't want to go down just one rating system's path because you realized that there's so much value in other paths as well. But you basically went the opposite way, where instead of no certification, you kind of did them all. So how did you, why was that so valuable for this project?
I think it's a really good and important question. And I think that when we approach every project with every client, it's about alignment of values. And with some clients, the rating system isn't what matters. They're focused on other things. And in other clients, it can really be very impactful. And what became clear very early on with Muhlenberg was that authentic sustainability mattered so much to them that they wanted to communicate that and express it in a verified way. They didn't just want to come out and say, hey, we made a really green and sustainable building. They wanted a third party to validate that. And, this is a very competitive market when we're talking about the small liberal arts colleges. And so differentiation in the marketplace is very important. And also the appeal to incoming students, right? The ability for a student to say, this represents my values. And having a Living Building Challenge project, well, none of the other schools that I looked at had that. They're doing something different here. And so for Muhlenberg, that instantly, for them, when they recognized that this was something new, this was something different, but more than those things, it was something meaningful to them. It wasn't just like a plaque. It was more about being able to represent their values in a really tangible and deep way that would resonate with their students, with their faculty, and their donor base as well. So it really made sense. The part that is very interesting, I think, is Passive House, because, from our perspective, we knew early on that in order to achieve Living Building Challenge, we needed to take a Passive House approach. That was the way that we were going to get there. And so it made so much sense. And this is, when Scott said we just did it anyway, that's why we did it anyway, because it was the smartest way to get there.
So again, what's interesting about this particular project is, yes, the college wanted to do the right thing and represent their values, but it was also a little bit of a value proposition. It had monetary value because they saw the chance that by representing themselves that way and having the plaque, going through certification, that they might be able to attract more students. And a few more students actually means they can pay for the extra money that certification is.
Hugely valuable.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that we ever got from a student was when looking at sustainability and benchmarking systems like LEED and LBC and Passive House. The student said something roughly like this: we see what you're talking about. LEED is about the building, where Living Building Challenge is about us. And hearing that student say that really stuck with me.
So when looking at all three certifications, they all offer different levels of rigor in what they bring to the project. And so one of the things that's unique about Living Building Challenge is, yes, it's very broad. Yes, it's deep, but it's verified by performance, which is critical. So we have a 1 year after the building takes occupancy where we actually have to prove our energy use, prove our water use, prove that we've done the engagement things that we said that we were going to do. LEED, we know very well as a tool that helps design and construction teams perform, right? We've established this over decades at this point, and it has a very strong track record. And so it's really good for those things. And that's one of the reasons why we like it. And, also in this case for the college, it had very broad name recognition, that appeals to a certain donor base and a certain community base and students as well. Passive House is great in a different way because it's such a valuable design tool that when we're, designing a building in an integrated way with our envelope and our mechanical systems, it really helps us to optimize things. And similar to Living Building Challenge, there is a verification component of it as well. So we see in construction that, as Scott was mentioning earlier, yes, we've passed our blower door test. And that's a really unique aspect of Passive House as well.
One of my favorite stories from construction was trying to deal with the windows and the delivery time. And the contractor came back and said, well, if we can just substitute out this spacer for a metal spacer, we can really accelerate the time frame that we'll be able to deliver. And so we went back and used the Passive House tools. We went back to Woofy and did the modeling. And we're like, that spacer is such a significant amount of energy in this building because everything else is so tight that it's roughly equivalent to like 3 or 4 photovoltaic panels, which is notable. It's like 3 or 4% of the energy. And then the college immediately, once they had the math and the proof, they were easily able to make the decision and said, guess what? We'll wait. Get us what we paid for. And that was one of the things that was really critical in us achieving Passive House.
So to that point, one of the things that's really fascinating is, even though we dropped Passive House during design, we kept doing it and we kept up with that WWOOFie model. And so in construction, and everyone who's been through a construction project, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, knows there's going to be substitutions. And what it allowed us to do is to continue to benchmark those substitutions through construction to make sure that we were still hitting our targets. And again, this was not because anyone was telling us to or holding our feet to the fire, but because we were doing that for ourselves. We said, this is the standard that we're holding ourselves to.
No, I think it's great. And that's another similarity to what Rob was talking about, where you as a firm set up a specific or a certain framework for yourself that you hold yourself accountable to. So sure, in your case, it's meeting the certification criteria, but it's not something that the client in this case asked for. So how do you deal with that with other projects, like in general?
Why do I wait for my client to ask for it? If it's the right thing to do, you do it. That's the obligation of this profession. I don't go to my doctor and tell him what I think. I listen to what my doctor wants to do. So I think in this profession, we really need to reverse the way that we think. And that's super important. We need to be doing what the right thing is for the environment, the right thing for our client is, and helping them understand what good looks like. And part of that is pursuing certifications like LEED and LBC and Passive House. Part of it is doing the math to prove it out with Passive House. It's just the right thing to do. We got to do it. Stop waiting for your client to come to you. You tell your client what is right. And if they tell you don't pursue certification, don't. But you better do it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
One of the things that we have a very strange track record of at Revision is not talking about sustainability to our clients. So sometimes, as practitioners, we tend to fret a little bit too much about convincing our clients of sustainability. But to Scott's point, what he's saying, we just do it and don't talk about it. And then it doesn't become a thing. It doesn't become something that is on the radar to be cut. Because if you have a client who says, no, we're not interested in certification, it's not a value to us, it becomes a target. And so there's a lot of things that, as we said earlier, we just bake it in. It's part of the design. It's part of good design. We don't need to make a big deal about it. It's just there.
And one thing that I think, Drew, you and I have learned is there is no certification system that's right. They're all right. It's about doing something and using something as a framework and a benchmark, whether you make it on your own or you follow somebody else's. But just having some way to measure the results and to give you guidance on how to get there. We're all getting to the right spot. And I think over time, we're going to see that these certification systems all blend together.
Well, eventually maybe it becomes code, so we don't need certification systems anymore. So what are other means of accountability? Like how else do you get people to be, so that they can hold themselves accountable to sustainability goals?
I think some people, larger firms tend to use like a director of sustainability, that it's their job to motivate other team members to deliver. Some firms, I think our approach here, our firm, if you ask us who's the director of sustainability, I can point to 20 people in the firm. Every single one of them is. And that's one way to make sure that you have the accountability is you make everybody the champion and everyone make sure they get the job done.
Well, and that was actually a really good point in Rob and team's presentation, where you can't just have one person lifting 100-pound weight. You need 10 lifting 10 pounds, and then it's possible.
Yeah, that was well said by Rob.
So another really important way to hold ourselves accountable is I think that we all in this industry need to recognize and hold up the AIA framework for design excellence. This is something that as an industry, we've stepped forward and said, this is what makes projects good. Sustainability makes projects good. And to look at it in that broad lens, that it's not just about something that looks good, it's not just something that's on budget, but it also has to perform, it has to be equitable, it has to serve our communities, and making sure that that is what we hold ourselves accountable to in our own work, what we stand behind as an industry of professionals.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.